Thanks so much. New data this morning from a new Marquette Law School poll shows only about 31% of voters polled say they view Democratic Socialist candidates favorably. This was a national survey conducted in the last week of July.
And this comes as State Representative Francesca Hong, a Democratic Socialist, leads recent polls among the Democrats hoping to become Wisconsin's next governor. 16% of voters polled say they need to learn more about these candidates, while more than half say they view them unfavorably.
Those numbers are similar when voters were asked to share their views on the party in general. The biggest change is among the favorable opinion, where only 24% of voters say they're on board with the Democratic Socialists of America party. Checking back in with